Point of view. So we've talked a little bit about focal length, right? The way that it will sort of magnify a portion of your scene without changing the relationship between the objects, how that's different from physically moving closer or farther away. Um, it also changes sort of the way the space is rendered, right? So a wider angle lens will make foreground images feel bigger than background images. A wider angle lens will expand space, right? That's why your realtor is like, yes, this is a lovely, gigantic studio apartment in the East Village for only $5,000. And you get there and it's like a closet, right? But you're like, wow, in the photograph, it looked huge. And you're like, yeah, that's because they used a wide angle lens. So wide angle lens, meaning a shorter focal length, will expand space. The longer, sorry, there we go. There's my wide angle trash can picture. The longer focal length will collapse space. If you think back to some of the news coverage of the pandemic, one of the things that frustrated me was you would have these photographs that were talking about how people were not social distancing, and the photographer used a really long focal length lens to collapse space and make it look like people were right on top of each other, even though, you know, maybe they did have a reasonable amount of distance between them. So that's going to collapse space with a longer focal length lens. So when you're shooting portraiture, right, I would want to use a longer lens so that I can collapse space and see my model with the backdrop rather than my model, the backdrop, the studio space around them, all of my equipment, the craft table, all that stuff. When I'm shooting my architectural stuff, I want to use the big wide angle lens so I can see all 5 walls of the room. It's a lot of walls. And make the space look bigger than it is, right? I mean, if you're a good architectural photographer, that's not actually what you're trying to do, but you know what I mean. So let's talk a little bit now about point of view. Point of view is where the camera is situated in relationship to your subject. So we, as photographers, as human beings, I mean, I'm making assumptions here, but you know, we tend to look at things from our eyeballs, right? Some of you are like, no, I see things with my nose. I'm like, okay. So we tend to just put the camera up here and take a picture that way. Now, I certainly understand that, right? Like, that's where my eyeballs are too. I mean, my eyeballs are probably a little shorter than some of yours, but that's our point of view. There are 3 sort of broad brush perspectives or perspective styles. This is your bird's eye view, right, above looking down. This is your worm's eye view, below looking up. And then architectural favorite, the straight ahead view, just looking directly at something. When we are taking a picture at eye level, we are most often just looking straight ahead, or we're pointing up and down a little bit and not really thinking about it. It can be a useful exercise if you are feeling stuck on something to consider, what does it look like from way down here, right? What does it look like from, if I hold my camera way up over my head? What does it look like if I get up on a ladder? What does it look like if I lie down on the floor? I'm not saying you should go run around and take all of your pictures lying down on the ground. A, that is gross. B, it's a little weird. But it's a good thing to keep in mind, to be aware of the fact that you're seeing it with your eyes. That doesn't mean it's necessarily the best shot, right? So think about, what would I get if I was above? What would I get if I were below? You know, even just the change from holding it up here to moving it down around sort of the center of the body, right? All of those things are going to change how we see the scene in front of us. If we think about, you know, famous Muhammad Ali, you know, like standing there looming over his opponent, right? That was a shot that was from a fairly low angle, and he looks much more majestic, much more monumental. If I'm looking down on, you know, the basketball court from above, everybody seems much smaller and a little bit more insignificant than if I'm courtside with this, you know, wide angle lens, seeing someone looming right over me as they go for the ball. So keep that in mind as you are thinking about how to, let's go ahead and hide that guy. Keep that in mind as you are thinking about taking pictures. Don't just mindlessly take them right where your eyes are. Think about, what would I get if I did change my point of view? Would it be better? Would it be worse? I mean, maybe it would be terrible. I don't know. But don't just do what is easiest. Um, when you go to take a picture, right? Like, take a little bit of time and try actually moving around, right? You will look goofy, but you will find out if there's another point of view that will be better. And that's really the goal, right? To be conscious of what these other points of view are, so that if one of them is going to be superior to the shot you are currently taking, you can get the better picture. Okay, so hopefully that wasn't a dog's breakfast. You now have some ideas of focal length, right? The longer focal length, which is magnifying portion of your view, the lower focal length, which is sort of visually giving you a wider image of the scene. We've talked about the difference between zooming in, right, where again we're just magnifying things, right? The relationship between objects in the frame does not change, and physically moving with your feet, where the relationship between those objects does change. And now we've talked about where we place our camera and how that can also affect what we see, and perhaps more importantly, the way that we think about it, right? Making something seem big and ominous and looming, making something seem small and insignificant, or, you know, with buildings and spaces, having that dead ahead view that makes things feel more formal and a little bit more sort of classic architectural photography. All right, cool. Go out there, take pictures.